I want to welcome everybody back. If you don't know me, you should know me by now. I'm so tired of saying my name. I don't know what to do. But I want to welcome you back to this afternoon's panel, and it's the last panel of the conference. It's invigorating to know that we made it this far, and it's also sad that it's slowly coming to a close. But today's, this conference, this program this afternoon is on Beyond Banned Books and Censorship. So our guests are going to be examining the broader impact, significance, and representation of African diasporic literature beyond instances of censorship. Some of the themes discussed will include cultural preservation, diverse storytelling, identity, the power of narrative context, social justice advocacy, and the overall importance of African diasporic literature in society. So first, let me introduce today's moderator, Abby West. Abby is the Vice President and Editorial Director of Amistad HarperCollins' storied imprint. She has fans. Dedicated to storytelling, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Abby leads the editorial vision and acquisitions of strategy of one of publishing's most culturally significant lists, home to landmark works including Pulitzer Prize winner The Known World and the complete canon of Zora Neale Hurston, From Their Eyes We're Watching God, to the posthumously published Barracoon and the Life of Herod the Great. Her recent titles include Tony at Random by Dana A. Williams, It's Never Too Late by Marla Gibbs, and Positive Obsession by Susanna M. Morris. Abby's career spans every major evolution in media, from journalism to digital, audio to publishing. Prior to Amistad, she served as Director of Inclusive Content Programming at Audible, where she also co-founded the Black Employee Network, a recovering journalist, so we have to find out what that is, who has worked at Essence, Entertainment Weekly, and People. Abby brings a deep commitment to stories that explore, empower, and amplify voices too often left unheard. She also serves on the board of the Children's Law Center of New York. Please welcome Abby West. Abby will be joined by Dolen Perkins Valdez, who is the New York Times bestselling author of Wench, Bomb, Take My Hand, and most recently, Happy Land. Take My Hand was named Most Anticipated Book of 2022 by Newsweek, San Francisco Chronicle, Essence, NBC News, and elsewhere. It was awarded the 2023 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work in Fiction, and the 2023 BCALA Award for Fiction. The audiobook version of Take My Hand was named a Best of 2022 by Audible. Happy Land appeared on many most anticipated lists on 2025, including People, Elle, Reader's Digest, Women's World, and elsewhere. The American Bar Association recently awarded Take My Hand its prestigious Silver Gavel Award, which recognizes an outstanding work that fosters America's public understanding of law and the legal system. Dolen has established herself as a preeminent chronicler of American historical life. In 2013, she wrote the introduction to a special edition of Solomon Northup's 12 Years a Slave, published by Simon & Schuster, which became a New York Times bestseller. She followed that with an introduction to Elizabeth Kethle's Behind the Scenes, published in 2016, and forthcoming 75th anniversary of George Orwell's 1984, which will be published by Penguin Random House in 2023, which was published. Dolen is a 3-time nominee for a United States Artist Fellowship and is currently Associate Professor in the Literature Department at American University and lives in Washington, D.C. with her family. Please welcome Dolen. These are some impressive people, right? Very impressive. Dr. Ayo Sekai stands as a force in academia, a change maker and champion for intellectual rigor and the amplification of Black scholarship. With more than a decade of experience as a civil servant, she has held senior leadership roles across several federal agencies. Harnessing over 20 years of influence and authority in publishing, she is the visionary, founder, CEO, and publisher of Universal Right Publications, a beacon for transformative peer-reviewed works by Black scholars, amplifying the collaborative power of allyship and community. Earning her PhD in political science with specializations in Black politics and international relations from Howard University, Sekai honed her expertise on linguistic imperialism. Her groundbreaking research interrogates language, structures that permeate systemic racism, and dismantles oppressive narratives that inform public policy, legislature, and politics. As the author of A2, a scholarly poetical science discourse, the PSD method, her career is marked by excellence and an unwavering commitment with a mantra of integrity to do no harm. She's not merely a leader, she has an ethos of her own. She is a movement, a dynamic blend of scholar, author, publisher, and advocate, redefining the boundaries of academic discourse with uncompromising brilliance. Please welcome Dr. Sekai. And rounding out our roundtable is Clarence A. Haynes, the author of the urban fantasy novel The Ghost of Gwendolyn Montgomery, and co-author of the acclaimed YO Afrofuturist series Nubia, The Awakening and the Reckoning, written with actor-producer Omar Epps. He is also author of the nonfiction work The Legacy of Jim Crow, published as part of the True History series for middle grade readers. In addition to his writing, Clarence has worked as an editor for a variety of publishers in genres that include science fiction, YA general fiction, history, and memoir. His upcoming novel is The Broken Hearts Agency. Please welcome Clarence Haynes. So now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Abby West.
Thank you, Donna. Before you sit down, I have to ask everyone to give Donna and her team another round of applause for an expertly curated and just joy-filled conference that we've all benefited from. And as you can tell from the team on this panel, which I'm very delighted to be a part of, it's a mix of experiences that is going to be really beneficial to everyone here. So I want to emphasize that we're really leaning into the beyond here. We're not going to be focusing so much on what's been taken from us, but also really looking at what this literature is for, what it protects, and what we can do with it. So just that's the framing that we're moving forward in. Okay. My first question is for the entire panel. Don't make me decide who goes first, so jump in. The word banned can make this literature sound like a victim. But from where each of you sit, does the current moment feel more like an attack on something fragile or an attack on something extraordinarily powerful?
I'll take this. This is a moment of extraordinary, powerful opportunity for all of us to rise. They don't ban things that are not important. They don't ban things. They don't ban things if it's not valuable. It's kind of like our current administration calling Africa the SO countries, right? But that's where they go to get all their resources, their information, and their titanium for their cell phones. They want us to run away from what's important. So when we hear the word banned, run to it. Okay? You need to go to every Black bookstore, every Black distributor, go to all Black authors, and you get every book and put it on their shelves. Because we were banned since 1619, and we're still here. Going through all of the civil rights, all of that, we transcended all of that because we are We are naturally banned. We were not meant for this country. They did not make this country for us. So when you hear banned, it's because we're powerful, it's because we're brilliant, it's because we are meant for something greater, and we are the ones who are the keeper of who we are. So we are responsible for making sure that our scholars, our authors, our bookstores, our book publishers, and our vendors survive.
How do you follow that? You know, it makes me think of when we were kids and your parents or grandparents would tell you not to go near the socket. Because if you went near there, you know, you were going to electrocute yourself. And what did we do? We went right over there to that socket and we started plugging things in and taking it out and stuff. And I hear what you're saying, go to the socket, right? Because that's where the life is. And I definitely think about all of the literature being published right now. I feel like there's some kind of literary renaissance happening right now, y'all. And I know that there's a lot of talk on social media about publishing and that's sort of negative. But there are also a lot of new voices being published all the time. And we need to pay attention to them in whatever genre it might be, right? Whether it's even romance, to me, now is in a defiant moment of redefining who's desirable. You know what I'm saying? And so I think, you know, it's definitely important for us to think about purchasing, supporting, reading, you know, even watching films. We were all rooting, I think, many of us, for Sinners, which was a phenomenal, like, I was blown away by that film. And that, to me, is part of the renaissance that's happening right now. I haven't seen a film like that in 20, 30 years. I'm not even over exaggerating there. So, yes, this is a moment of great power, for sure.
Yeah, I'll just say ditto. I think the books that are being banned, extremely powerful works. I think when looking at book bans, it's important to think about keep in mind what's being said, what's the subtext of the bans. Basically, it's saying that, oh, if your work isn't white, patriarchal, straight, male, presenting a certain version of U.S. history, of cultural history, a certain lens, then it's not of worth. And we are of worth. I don't have to say this, but I think it's important to keep in mind what the underlying statements are, and then using that to galvanize what types of works you seek out, what types of narratives you center in your life. You know, as I think so many of us, as Dolen said, Sinners is just the thing. But to take a moment and to look at works in terms of the book world that are really just saying something that if you see someone who's like, this is pushing me the wrong way because of a particular racial history, a particular type of truth that's being presented, that is, I find, you know, oh, how can you say this? And we know what the truth is. Then go to that work, look up that author, support them, shine a light on them on your social media platforms. It's really, really important. We have a lot of tremendous power in terms of the authors we support, in terms of the stories that we highlight, and it's just something not to take for granted. So.
This next question is for Dolen. Your amazing novels travel deep into American historical memory. Enslaved women, forced sterilization, freed people, building kingdoms. When a book like yours is challenged, what specifically is being refused? Is it the facts, the feelings, the humanity of the people, all of the above and more?
I'm going to say it's all of it, but, you know, let's take My Hand, for example, right? My third novel that is loosely based on the story of Minnie Lee and Mary Alice Ralph, who were two little girls in Montgomery, Alabama, who were forcibly sterilized without their family's permission when they were 12 and 14 years old. That case was in every national newspaper, every magazine. It was on television. It was on NBC Nightline. And the family came to Washington, D.C., testified before a Senate subcommittee hearing led by Ted Kennedy, the late senator, televised. It led to informed consent, a document that doctors and patients are still required to fill out if a woman on public assistance requests sterilization procedures such as tubal ligation. Still. And yet, we don't learn about the Ralph sisters in medical school. OBGYNs, you can go to your OBGYN tomorrow and ask them if they know who the Ralph sisters are, and 9 times out of 10, they don't. And they are still alive. So when you ban that story, why do people even, why wouldn't they know about why they have to sign the form? And in fact, I'd heard doctors complain about this form because they didn't know the history. So when they are banning these historical accounts, they're pushing back not only on the uglier parts and what they did to the girls, but they're also pushing back on the heroism, the great heroism. I consider Minnie Lee and Mary Alice Ralph to be American heroines. Why haven't they been invited to the White House and given a medal for their sacrifice for this country, right? So they're pushing back also on our great power and strength and dignity in the face of these adversities. And I think one of the things that we have to remember every time we highlight and emphasize a historical narrative about our people, no matter how dark it may seem, it's also a testament to our spirit, you know, and it's also a testament to our brilliance. And so, you know, I was just telling a friend of mine, I live in Washington, D.C., and so many of my friends, I'm going to say nearly all of them, black women who were in federal government, have retired, okay? And it's so common that I'll say to, you know, I'll talk to a friend, I'll say, so what you doing now? Have you retired yet? That's how we talk about it. We don't say, like, did Doge fire you? We say, have you fired? And I said, you know, the history of black folks in the DMV has been one of dignity, right? Like, you get in an elevator at the library and the security guard is smart, you know, and dignified and well-read and wants to engage. What are you studying here in the library? Those sorts of things. And so D.C. has a history of dignified middle-class and working-class black folk. And by taking away those jobs and ignoring that history, it's like they trying to take away our dignity. But they didn't, because I'm hearing about all of the brilliant entrepreneurial ideas also that women are, you know, every time I talk to someone, they've started a business, or, you know, one of my friends says she's a certified AI consultant and she's getting too much business, more than she can handle. So it's like you can only keep this creative spirit down for a minute. But the point I want to make is that when you ban these stories, it's more than just a story. It's humanity that you're denying.
All of that. Yes. This next question is for Clarence primarily, but again, as with all of these, and I should say, please feel free to build on each other. Clarence, you have lived on both sides of the page, as we discussed, as a writer whose work gets published, and as an editor who decides what reaches readers by also how you shape them and what goes out into the world. When African diasporic literature gets targeted, what do you see that perhaps only someone who has held both the roles that you have sees?
Great question. And by the way, I should say, I am the person who is supposed to be here is a publisher, editor, and author named Krishan Trotman. She was unable to make it. She had it canceled. She is the publisher of Legacy Lit, which is an imprint at Hachette Book Group, which specializes in providing a platform for literary voices that historically have not been provided a platform. She sends her regards. She's very sorry she can't be here, and she would be able to answer this question as well. Oh, you're very kind. So if I seem a little like, what's going on? So I'm going to speak a little bit about how, because I've worked as an in-house editor, I continue to work as a freelance editor, and I'm an author. I'm going to speak to how the business works a bit, and then how book bans can shape what the conversations are. So for instance, we saw a flowering of books that spoke to the Black diasporic experience after the murder of George Floyd. I would say probably within a year, I had never in my life seen so many Black books on the New York Times bestseller list. I'd never seen anything like it. And now, in 2026, what does that list look like? If you would look at it, right now I think it's Tyree Jones. It's probably the only one I can immediately think of who's really there. So okay, and but in far more limited representation. What happens is book bans can be impactful in that it shapes what the conversations are for publishers. If a book isn't seen as working, if they put out a quote-unquote Black book and they're like, oh, look, the sales are not what they could be if we had acquired a publication that didn't center the Black experience, then that can impact what books are acquired in the future. Book bans impact sales if by just lowering the amount of places, spots that take on a book, whether libraries, booksellers, if a bookseller wants to avoid controversy, or most booksellers I don't think agree with book bans, but let's say they're speaking to a particular constituency, they don't want to offend their part of the world that they're in, it impacts sales. And sales then will impact what publishers might want to take on. So that's the big, for me, that's the big danger that I see, that it can both directly and indirectly impact what publishers want to put out there. However, at the same time, as my fellow panelists said, when you see a book that's banned, that can generate heat, that can generate interest. That's usually a sign of like, there's something interesting here, there's something compelling here, there's something progressive here, there's something out of the box, edgy, something that's gonna be like, And so in the same token, I think a ban can be very galvanizing, again, if we pay attention and if we throw our support around those works. So it's a complex thing. I don't think there's, I'm certainly against book bans, but at the same time, if we pay attention, there are ways that we can continue to turn the tide in our favor. Then as an author, speaking from the perspective of being a writer, I do think there are writers who will write what they want to write and who are like, I don't care what bans are put in place, I'm going to say what I need to say. I do think there are also writers who will be like, oh, what is the market telling me? Oh, look at all these white books. Let me try to get a piece of that pie. I'm not going to really center my community, our community. I'm going to take a different track. I have seen that as well. That's reality. And so, again, it's complex. I don't think there's necessarily, I think there are both positive and negative consequences of what we're seeing, but I just wanted to give sort of an overview of what are some of the things that can happen as a result of bans? What are some of the decisions that both publishers and authors might make as a result? So,
thank you for that. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I am a founder and an owner of an academic press. And I'm going to talk about the epistemic legacy of what that means. Despite the historical marginalization that has happened, and this has been happening since they brought Black people to this country, enslaved and taking our name, taking our identity, taking our language, taking our community, taking our culture, there has been Black publishing and Black scholars and Black authors who have been resilient and uncompromising and unapologetic in their work. As a matter of fact, I mean, in 1867 that Broad Street, joined with the AME Church and became the largest Black publisher. And then later on, we have, Hakeem Matabuti, who started Third World Press in the 60s, and that's now over almost 60 years old. We have Paul Coates, who was a Black Panther movement maker, Black Panther Party member, who started Africa Black Classic Press, and we have an honoree right here who is, Casa Hunchikol, who's being honored for Africa World Press and Red Sea Press, and then also a Black children's book publisher. They only publish children's book, and they only publish Black children's book, Justice Books. I've been doing it for over 40 years. So it doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter that they're banning our work and telling us that we can't publish, and they're taking out words out of the dictionary and what we can say and not say. They can say that, but who's making us do it? Why are we complicit and compliant in our own marginalization? As a doctor and a scholar who has gone through the PhD program, I understand implicitly the trauma and the torment. We have to cite perspective and context. If you're going through a doctoral program, when you're doing your research, you have to cite the most recent publications in your field, the top 5. 80% of publications in academic publishing are done by white men. Only 6% are done by Black people in general, and everybody else in between. So you cannot get a grant if you're not published. You cannot get a tenure track promotion if you're not published. You cannot get promotion if you're not published. You cannot get anything if you're not published in the academic world. So imagine if all you have to look at and decide are white people who are looking at us as subjects and objects and not centering us as the agency of our own stories. Imagine if that's all you have to do, which is why I started Universal Right Publications. Well, it's 24 years old this year. Thank you. And I pivoted towards academic publishing and only publishing Black scholars to give Black scholars voice and space so that we do not have to do it. But the fact that we have publishers like Justice Books, Africa World Books, Black Classic Press, Third World Press, and so many other self-publishing and all of them, I say if you're Black and you have an opportunity to be published, get published. Because that is the protection of epistemic legacy, of our linguistic agency and sovereignty. That is how you protect yourself against AI. It's how you're going to protect yourself against theft and plagiarism. It's how you're going to protect your work. So get published and focus on the work. Follow the work. Being banned means nothing. That's them. That's not us.
I think you both hit on something that's really important, the distinction of the writing versus the business, as well as the need for the entire ecosystem that we have.
And not, can I call you Dr. Ayo or Dr.
Ayo?
No, I feel like I need to say doctor. Dr. Ayo. And also in terms of being aware that there are multiple ecosystems, that's what, right? Because everything that I said was very much geared towards what would be considered the quote unquote mainstream publishing industry. But there are options, there are other ecosystems, there are other avenues, there are a variety of paths. And so I think what the doctor pointed out is tremendous. So.
Well, we're going to keep running it to you. Question primarily for you, and again, everyone jump in. When African diasporic literature is removed from a curriculum or a library shelf, what is the linguistic and political function of that removal? What does the absence teach us? And who is it teaching?
Absolutely. There's a thing called, thank you for that question. It's going right into my dissertation research on linguistic imperialism. And it's so funny because when I was doing linguistic imperialism in 2018, I was the PhD candidate, and I was doing linguistic imperialism, and everyone in the political science department go, what's that? What's that? And then here comes the first term of this person, and everyone was talking about linguistic imperialism, and I was so honored by my alma mater who said, you were ahead of your time. So language sovereignty. Language sovereignty. You know, there is a thing called dog whistle politics, okay? In dog whistle politics, and I think it's a guy named Henry, something that came up with that term, a Latino man, and that just means that when they're talking to you, they're talking to a specific demographic, they know who they're speaking to. So terms like welfare queen, like even when they talk about the war on drugs versus the war on, what's the other one? Opioids, right? Opioids is a white people thing, right? And war on drugs is a black people thing. So when you hear it, it's kind of like, oh, we need to get work and support all the people who are on opioids. And we've got to, get them into treatment centers. But then when the war on drugs and crack and cocaine, oh, it's those people, right, who are on drugs and cocaine. It's the same thing for welfare queen. It's the same thing. So they have a language, a coded language that when they're speaking to them, their demographic, who they're speaking to. So when they're speaking about band, they're not talking to us. They really aren't. They're talking to their demographic. They're talking to their people, who's funding them, who's supporting them, who's putting money behind them, saying that they're worried about blackness. And I will go a step further because yesterday there was the panel on birthright and stuff like that. They were talking about some really important things. And I want to say that band is also coming to the fact that black people are the global majority, okay? Black and brown people are the global majority. In addition, Africa has the youngest demographic of people who will be giving birth and having children over the next decade right, exactly. So all of the banning books, banning epistemic, control over women's bodies, all of those banning are in protection of themselves, of the white bodies. They're worried about white women not having enough children, not writing, not publishing, not doing the work, so they figure they will suppress us. It is not about us. So that's what they're trying to take away from us. We have the power. We have already won, and that is why they are so worried.
Said and heard, yes. For all three of you, and I'm going to start with Dolen, this literature has survived the Middle Passage, Reconstruction's collapse, the burning of Tulsa, the crack epidemic, and now this moment, whatever this is that we're in. What does it mean for a literature to be this resilient? What mechanisms, oral, printed, digital, and underground, carry it forward when official channels close? What do we turn to?
It's interesting because when I was growing up, I never thought I had any writers in my family, but when I was growing up, the front porch is where we told our stories. And when you were sitting out on that porch, we sat out there every single day. And people would stop by. We'd wave as the cars went by. And there were storytellers in the family, people who never wrote a book, never wrote anything, but they could tell a story that would have everybody enthralled. And, I recently was going through some papers, cleaning up, and I had a cousin who died at 32 of congestive heart failure, and I found some poems she had sent me. And she knew that I wanted to be a writer, and she said, Dolen, can you help me get these published? And I hadn't looked at those, and they were beautiful poems. She had never gone to college. She had, in the letter that she wrote me, she said, I'm working at McDonald's, and I'm writing these poems at night. And the poems are absolutely stunning. And I just, I'm so glad I have them. So I say that to say that, in the tradition of the ancients, Black people fundamentally are oral storytellers. And we talk about publishing, and we get so caught up in the written word and in publishing, but we were the progenitors of spoken word poetry. We are the people who, are the greatest comedians on the planet. We're the greatest songwriters. We were talking about language. We made Twitter. I hate that we keep making these people rich. Now we're making threads because we're just so funny and brilliant on there. We created American slang. My daughter's teaching me about being outside and who controls the traffic and all this stuff. Atlanta slang. She's in Atlanta. And so, we create American culture. And so when we ban the books and so forth and so on, what they're trying to do is to shut down our language, but they can't because we can still talk. And as long as we can talk, right, we can tell a story. And as long as we can pick up a pencil, we can write a poem, even if it's never published. I think we have to get out of this mindset that everything has to be published. Not everybody is meant to be published, y'all. Not every story is meant to be in a bookstore, but they are meant to be shared. Do you understand? So my feeling about it is there is a way in which we can continue to revive and sustain the oral culture from which we came. And in our families, if you are a person that likes to write and there's an elder talking, write it down, record them. I remember when that young actress, she was young at the time, we all were, Lisa Gay Hamilton, recorded Bea Richards, who was a fundamental activist, along with Louise Patterson and these very powerful communists in the 1950s. And no one had ever sat down with Bea Richards and listened to her story. She had this beautiful poem about American womanhood, or I think it was called A Black Woman Speaks, right? And Lisa Gay Hamilton, when nobody else, just bought a camera, went into Bea Richards' house and recorded her. And then not long after that, Bea Richards died. I never forgot that when I saw that. Y'all can find, I think it's still on YouTube maybe. But I never forgot that because I thought, it's that easy? All I have to do is just go to my grandma's house and record her? Like, we can do that. Record the elders. Talk to them. There's a lot of secrets that die with our elders, But those secrets sometimes need to be unearthed. So I'm not that worried about who gets published. I am. Of course, it's very important because the written record is very, very important. But I think we cannot forget our oral traditions. I really feel strongly about that.
I'm going to ask if either of you want to add on to that, but I do want to add to that it's something I've always thought about, especially sitting where I sit, that publishing gives you scale, but you don't need that to have impact. And I just want everyone to always remember that your writing has impact to whoever gets to hear it. Getting a publishing deal, it's fantastic, it's great gravy, and it may amplify the work, but there's other ways to get your impact. Anybody want to answer?
No, I just want to agree with that, because, and especially when you talked about, as long as you could talk, right? Because when they're talking about taking out individual words out of books, out of schools, out of, our narrative, So if you actually comply with that, then you can no longer speak those words, right? So I agree. We are griots. We are natural storytellers, which is why I wrote my book, A Squared, a scholarly poetical science discourse, because I've always been a poet and a writer and a storyteller. And then when I got to doing my doctoral studies and my educational research, they told me that you can't be a scholar, not the school specifically, but just the industry of academic scholarship. You can't be a scholar and then be an artist and a creative. How do you do that? And, I said, okay, I'm going to combine the two. So I combined the scholarship, creating, basically, if you like any type of Netflix episodes, I have the poems that I've written, and then I write a scholarly discourse that have references, citation, and index. So, so basically, you get the poem if you like the poems, and then you get the research if you need the research, and you're gonna cite me on that. You know what I mean?
And what's hitting me about what you're saying is you didn't wait.
And I didn't compromise.
Yeah, you just did the thing that you wanted to do.
Right. I honored my heart.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
That's really that's the thing. You don't have to, regardless of whether you are doing traditional publishing, non-traditional publishing, self-publishing, just sharing your work. You don't have to wait. Do you know how many times I've made a connection or gotten some sort of media hit or gotten a sale or whatever, just simply by saying, hello, my name is so-and-so. This is what I've done. Maybe it would be of interest to you. And someone is like, yes, why yes, that would be of interest to me. Can you appear here? Can you talk about this? Can you do this? Can you do that? The community, the opportunities are there. Just looking towards institutions that, by the way, are going to turn back to us once they sit with their stories and it's dry and there's nothing to it, and there's no integrity, and it just feels like, well, something's missing. Oh, black people, it's gonna come right back. But in the meantime, you don't have to wait. There are opportunities galore, and it may not look like this traditional notion of success. It can look also like a traditional notion of success. I'd also argue it's just going to be more quiet, just be not necessarily be in the limelight, and that's okay. We don't need that type of validation. So.
And just a point of note, it's happening right now. You're in the Center for Black Literature at Medgar Evers College. Right? It's happening right now among us. We're here together. We're sharing together. We're amplifying each other. We're supporting each other. We're learning and sharing. It's happening right now, everything you just said.
Okay, next, Dolen. You write historical fiction that recovers stories the archive deliberately forgot, as we discussed earlier. When we talk about cultural preservation, are we preserving history or are we building something new? And is there really a difference there?
Well, we're doing both, but I also like to think we're building something new. There was that term that was popular some years ago about like neo-slave narratives, and it was us sort of re-examining the record and thinking about how we were going to frame our stories about enslavement. I mean, even the word has changed. When I first published Wench in 2010, we were still using the word slave. And now we don't anymore. We use enslaved, right? So language changes, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm good with that. And so I think that we are recovering, we're excavating, we are re-examining, but in the process of that, yeah, we are doing something new. We're looking at it in a new way. We know now a little bit more than we knew, even 10 years ago. We know more each day. And there's new perspective in that, right? So like when I think about Robert Jones's book, right? That beautiful book about love in the context of slavery. When I think about the ways in which we think about resistance even in the context of enslavement. And even if we don't go back that far, even when we think about, the Black Power movement, or when we think about Black feminism and the rise. I've been thinking a lot about Black feminism in the 80s and all of the things, all of the ideas that women they're still so powerful. There was a headline in the New York Times yesterday that said, I know y'all saw it. They changed it, I saw. It said 2 women and 2 blacks were denied promotion.
Yes.
Did you see that headline? And I thought, well, wait a minute.
I saw that and I was like, am I sleepy? Am I?
And then of course, because it's New York Times, it was repeated in all of these other media outlets, 2 women and 2 blacks. And I thought, well, what about me? What am I in there, And I remembered how black feminists of the 80s said, all the blacks are men and all the women are white, but some of us are brave. Yes. So all of those conversations still matter, but we can read. And this is a moment, because of the moment we're in, y'all. It is a 2 steps back moment for sure. And in that sense, some of the old revolutionary ideas are relevant again. That's sort of the sad part about it, that, everything Angela Davis said, y'all, we got to think about again. She's our elder. She ought to be retired now, but she's more relevant than ever, And so it's a moment where we are both looking back, just like that Sankofa board. We're looking back and forward at the same time. And I think I hope, I don't know, y'all. I mean, I'm still a young chicken, but I hope I live to see the revolution that's coming. I feel that something is coming. I really do feel that. And these young people, y'all, they're different. They're different. And, they're very, they don't play. Like my daughter, who's 19, is very strident in her views, and she does not compromise them for anybody, Whereas I'm like, well, can't we just can't we just have a 2-nation state in the Middle East? I'm of Gen X generation, and she's like, no, we cannot. So I say that to say that I hope to see, the return of women's reproductive rights. I hope to see another black president, hopefully a black female. I hope to live to see that, because it's all very possible.
That actually just made me think of something. I've had someone tell me that it takes something different to get something, to get rights, than it takes to keep them. And do you think that's true? And are our young people equipped to do that 2-step of the keeping with the same fire that it took to get?
I think they can. I believe in them. I think they're just different. And, I think about how different I was from my mother, who, grew up in Jim Crow South, and still to this day is, a little bit like, Dolen, don't say that. She still, thinks carefully before she speaks, and I don't do that as much, right? And then the next generation. So I'm okay with that evolution, because it's necessary. Because think about how difficult these forces are right now. They're very, very powerful forces at work. It's a very hostile atmosphere they're entering. The job market, if my daughter's in the sciences, the funding is being cut. There's, DEI was not affirmative action. It was something different. And that is being, sort of merged with this idea of affirmative action, but it was actually something different. It was just saying we value diversity. People can't even say that anymore. They can't even say we value having diverse perspectives at the table. And they dare put their pictures online of the executives, and there's no diversity anymore, and they're proudly of. I wouldn't even put those pictures online if that was my company. Really? Are you proud of what that board looks like? That's nothing to be proud of. So I say that to say, yeah, I believe in the young people. I do. I hope I'm not wrong, though.
We're all channeling Whitney right now, right?
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because it's definitely a different generation, and I'm with you. I believe in them. We're not going backwards. It's like saying that when we used the typewriter and went to computer, and now we're in this technology, that we're going to go back to the typewriter. But that's what they tried to do when they reversed Roe v. Wade, when they reversed affirmative action, when they banned DEI. And interestingly enough, I read in the newspaper, and I think it's been pervasive now, that white men have been, Stanford University, they put out some data that said that they have less application from white men since the banning of DEI and the overturning of affirmative action. Okay, white women were the majority recipient of affirmative action. So every time they think they're banning us and doing something to us, all they're doing is hurting themselves, so we good.
I didn't realize how late it was. Do I have time to do one more questions before we open? We're going to do one other question, then we're going to open it up for the Q&A. And now I have to skip my last question. I have so many questions for everyone here. But this is the airy-fairy thought leader question. If you could put one work of African diasporic literature, existing or not yet written, directly into the hands of every young person in this country right now, what would it be and why? I know you want to break that question.
Should I?
Okay, I'll go. Okay, I say any book. I say any book written by a black writer should be placed in the hands of a black child. I grew up here in Brooklyn, New York, in Bed-Stuy, by way of Jamaica, if you hear an accent. I see my mama in the audience. And I went to Prospect Heights High School, right around the corner. And I remember walking all the way to Eastern Parkway to take the train, the number 2 or number 5 train to Franklin Avenue to go to high school. There was a little black bookstore somewhere along that line, a little hole in the wall shack black bookstore. And I remember I am like maybe 14, 16 years old, between that age grade, brand new in this country, have no idea where I am, and just trying to figure it out. And I'm walking by this bookstore every day. In the evening, I would stop in and I would browse, and I had no idea what book to pick up, what book to read, what to look at. And eventually the man who owned that bookstore, I don't remember his name, a tall man, a little limp, and he picked up the book, Iceberg Slim, and gave to me. And I devoured every single word, every single copy, every single series. And then I came back for Donald Goins. Okay, they radicalized me. They did, and I learned about, double entendres and sexy words and how to, and political times. It was storytelling at its best, okay? So I think if you pick up a black book by any black scholar, black writer, it doesn't matter what type of trade, academic fiction, it doesn't matter what it is. Put it in the hands of a black child. Any book is good. And stay away from that book series that every parent put in the hands of their child, because I read that book series when I was I wrote it down. What is it called? The Bluford book series. Anybody know about the Bluford book series? Well, guess what, sis and brothers? The Bluford book series is a book series that was so popular in the 90s, every child in high school read it. I read it. They taught it to us. Our teachers gave it to us. Guess what? I was recently uncovered, and actually a young lady, Cheyenne Rosier, she actually did an expose, and she wrote an article. Find out that every copy of that book series was written by white people. Not one of them. The cover is of black children. And they were all derogatory. They were all talking about gang violence, getting pregnant and dropping out and taking drugs. That's all the Bluford book series is about. And we all read it in high school. They gave it to us. They told us we should read it. And just to come to find out that they were all written by white people, denigrating us, degrading our children, telling us the worst of the narrative about who we are. This is what they gave us. So stay away from that Bluford series and take away the money from their pocket and go to Just Us Books and buy all the black children's books that they sell and they write, and then go to the black bookstores and find all of the little books written for black children. There's so many beautiful books written for black children. I think there was a lady here, I don't remember her name. there's a young lady here that wrote 2 children's books. She speaks Gulagishi. What's her name again? Ebony. Thank you. Thank you. You know, she has 2 children's books talking about the language and Gulagishi and all of this stuff. There is so much out there. I mean, there's no excuse at all. Give a child a book and give them any book written by a black person, and you will be doing them a favor. Look what it did me reading Iceberg Slim and Donald Goins.
So I am Mr. Speculative Fiction. So I am a science fiction, fantasy, horror, mythology person, and so that's what I'm going to say. That's the genre, the line of books I'm going to represent. Speculative fiction, there's a way in which you can deal with ideas that maybe you can't so readily deal with if you're doing, if you're presenting stories that are based in the real world in the way that everything has to be exactly how we see it in the real world. You can play with metaphor. You can make all sorts of statements around race. I would tell everyone, if you haven't already, to choose a copy of a book, any book from the patron goddess of speculative fiction, Octavia Butler. Abby did a book called Positive Obsession that is a biography of Butler, and you will just find all sorts of stuff. A lot of people gravitate towards Kindred because it's a time-traveling story around slavery, but I would say choose something else, right? Because she does all sorts of things. She has a book, my favorite book from her is called Mind of My Mind, which is about a young black woman who's a telepath and creates her own family of telepaths and basically has to figure out how to get rid of her toxic father, who I think is does he read as European? Is he? Yeah, so there's all sorts of things happening there. She was really, really brilliant and my inspiration as a writer. So yeah, I'm gonna say check out speculative fiction, check out horror, fantasy, sci-fi. Dolen has a book called Bomb that I just realized recently has speculative fiction elements. It's there. There are all sorts of wonderful ways to play with narrative in that genre. So that's what I'm going to say.
Love that. And there's so much that speculative fiction can do to help illuminate Black life, too, right?
Yes.
It gives us another vehicle through which to think about ourselves.
Yes.
That's what I love about it, the possibilities. So I'm kind of easy on this. I'm going to just say historical fiction is my area here. And it's so interesting because when I first started writing, I thought, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed as like I wrote Wench. I was like, but I'm not going to write just historical fiction because I don't want to be pigeonholed. And then I wrote another one. And then I started to realize so many of my favorite books were historical fiction. I mean, The Known World, Amistad's Great Achievement by Edward P. Jones, to me, one of the greatest novels ever written. Toni Morrison's Beloved is historical fiction.
Toni Morrison's A Mercy also
Yes,
is something
which
that
is
a lot of
18th
people,
century.
and a lot of people overlook. And it's really short. It's short, so you can read
Yes.
it.
And she went all the way back to the 1700s, which I thought, I'm scared of the 18th century, but she did it. And there's so many of them, and I feel like I learned so much. I mean, my friend Honoré Fanon Jeffers, who writes poetry that's historically inspired, and also the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. Tiare Jones's new book, Ken, is historical fiction. I mean, all of my favorite books that I read are historical fiction. And I think what it is when I read a book, I want to be entertained. Don't get me wrong. If it's boring, I'm going to put it aside and go to sleep and read something else. But I love a good page-turning book where I'm also learning something, where as soon as I finish, I'm looking it up and trying to, like, what was that all about? My friend Tanya James has a book, Loot. She's an Indian American writer, which is a very, very good book. There's so many, and it's just book after book after book that you don't think of as being in the genre per se, but they are historical narratives. And it's to me, it's sort of what I live for. I just finished Rashonda Tate's book about the great jazz pianist Hazel Scott, set right here in New York. Love that book. And Rashonda doesn't get a whole lot of publicity and marketing, but she researched that book so beautifully, and it is such a good book. And Billie Holiday is all up in it. And I told Rashonda, I said, this is just an amazing book. So there's so many books out there that are, resurrecting these histories. Some of them are just great beach reads. Some are more serious. Like whatever your taste in historical fiction, it's there.
I so appreciate all of your perspectives. We're going to open it up to the audience now for Q&A. I have tons of other questions I can turn to as well, but let's see what you guys want to ask.
I know we didn't stun you all.
Hi, I have a comment more than a question and just a thought while you were all speaking. Just thank you so much. I was just thinking about how, things repeat themselves and, the enslaved were not allowed to read or write. And I was reading James by Percival Everett, and he gets this moment where he's like, I understand why they don't want me to read. It is private. I am by myself, and it is the most subversive thing that I can do. And just this is what the book banning moment is doing, not only for Black voices, but also they don't want white children to be like, wow, to see how brilliant we are, how much we rock. It is to suppress them at this point. So I just your thoughts made me think about, the power of literature and the power of the written word and the importance and why, we are brilliant, we are excellent, and we will, this future, this generation is not going to stand for it. And that's why they want to block us.
Thank you for that.
I just want to agree with you, on that point, because the fact is that with all of what children are going through, they're seeing everything, and it's the browning of America, that fear, right? Because you touched on a very good point on they don't want their children to see our brilliance. That's why they have things saying, oh, you're hurting my children, and they're doing this whole reverse racism, and they're putting out all of these protocols against us in the schools because they're saying, they do not want their children to learn about Black history, to learn about Black culture, yet they're co-opting everything, our bodies, our food, our clothing, our style, And so all the professors who teach in PWIs, which means predominantly white institutions, and HBCU is historically Black institutions. For a lot of professors who teach in PWIs, a lot of them say, I am glad to be here because I can ruin all of these beautiful babies for white supremacy. So, to your point.
I hope I could make a little comment and then ask for response to the comment. Some of the panelists referred to resistance and fear. I hear that a lot. So we know that historically we have been colonized and terrorized and exploited, and everything that we have done in response is resistance. So basically, those that are the dominators, they don't want resistance. So the banning of the books is a form of shutting down resistance. We know that. But John Henry Clark was my mentor. So was John Killings. And what I learned from them is one thing. Don't just look at what's happening. Look at the big picture. And Professor Clark said he had gone to Mr. Schomburg when he came to New York. and said, Mr. Schomburg, I want to know about black history. And so Mr. Schomburg said to him, young man, go and study what's missing from world history, and that's the history of your people. And so Professor Clark always said, look at the big picture. So beyond Marx and everybody who is going to give us a theory about what happened to us, I boiled it down to this. Europeans were in their country. They saw that they had a shortage, a severe shortage of land and resources. They looked in other countries and saw all of that, and they said, we're going to take it. And then the question is, well, you know what? We don't really have to pay. We don't have to trade. We can just take it. Why? Because we have bombs. And they don't have the weapons we have. Two, we know how to propaganda. We know how to lie. So it's the lie about who they are and who we are and the weapons. It's not that they're smarter. And so I'm interested to see how, as I think the panelists right there said what we were to expect about how far we have come with all of the AI. And this is my last point. And 2 days ago, Melania Trump, she was she monitored a conference on education. And I watched the video, part of the video, as she walked down a corridor, a long corridor, red carpeted. She's on one side walking very slowly and deliberately, and on the other side is a robot with blackface. Okay. Then she stopped at the table on this side. The robot walked around to the front. The audience is there. And the robot spoke in, I don't know, some of you may have seen it, in 3 languages, and then waved, and Melania took over. And I turned it off. But then I heard on WBAI radio that she said we were going to have those robots teaching our children in school. So as writers and educators, this is what the next generation hopefully will not have to deal with. So I ask you to comment on that.
I think there was a technology panel yesterday that addressed this really phenomenally, and I won't pretend to be as phenomenal as they were in regard to this question. But the truth is, technology is here, right? And it is transforming how we live and work and behave every day. And we are going to have to learn how to evolve with it. However, technology is just mimicking who we are. Technology, like they say, art imitates life, right? So they're teaching technology, including the AI, and all of that stuff. They're teaching technology, but technology does not have our nuances or accents or, our proclivities, exactly our passions, the way we love, the way we talk, the way we smile. AI will not be able to replicate that. And that's where storytelling and all of the writing that's going to be so important in the future, because we are really the keepers of society. And then also, I just wanted to touch back on something else, because we talk a lot about what is happening, that's going on around. A lot of things, and I made a comment earlier, happens for us and not necessarily to us, right? Historically, when they were doing integration into schools, black schools and black children were excelling so much that the fight for equality and equity ended up being, what they call it, like integration into schools. And then our children started suffering, right? And so now all of this banning is just going to take us back to who we are, to our cultures, to our stories, to our parents, to our grandchildren. And then we're going to be able to tell these stories to protect us from the AI and the technology intervention. And I just wanted to say one positive thing about allyship. And I feel like I have to say it because it was allyship that taught Frederick Douglass to read. It was allyship that helped, Harriet Tubman, with underground tunnels, because she couldn't hide black people in black people's houses. That's the first place they would have looked, right? She had to hide them in, allies' homes. And a lot of us who are editors, directors, associate publishers, we work in predominantly white presses. Okay, and a lot of us who are published in the traditional publishing sphere are published by white publishers. So I don't want to put it completely down, because even with me being an academic publisher, emerging into a space that with all the publishing that have been done historically, that there's not been a black-owned, founded, operated academic publisher, is because of my partnership with Sage Publishing, which is one of the largest academic publisher in considered the big fives. So we have to also look to our allies, because there are people who marched on Selma with Martin Luther King, put their bodies on the line to make a lot of change. It would have never been televised. So we have to also find our allies, because we are only 13% of this population. Only 13%, and they have the power. So we need to find our allies across demographic, and we need to use that to empower ourselves and to protect ourselves.
Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for this panel. I really appreciate it. I have two questions that are related to each other, all in one. First is, do you think that there are some books that maybe should be banned, not necessarily African diasporic books, but books that actually cause more harm than good in our curriculum? I'm thinking, for instance, the ways that I was impacted by having to read Adventures of Huckleberry Finn when I was in high school, or even Othello, where even though books, that are generally celebrated by Shakespeare, without the context of the issues of white supremacy and anti-blackness, you can very much not see yourself in a positive light without that context. The second part of the question is, when we talk about how they don't want us to read these books, is it also possible that they don't want us to even know how to read? Like, I've noticed even how students respond more to books that reflect them, have their likeness. I remember, I was a high school teacher for a few years, and a lot of the students oftentimes didn't even want to open up the book that were generally the curriculum. But when I exposed them to Passing by Nella Larson, Beloved by Toni Morrison, there was a change where they responded to it in ways where they actually admitted to me this was the first time that I actually opened up a book instead of SparkNotes. So I'm just curious if there is a way to view those two in tandem, like some books that we should actually, quote unquote, ban from our black households, and things to require for our household.
Thank you for that. That's a very thoughtful question, and that requires really a sort of nuanced answer, right? It's to me, it's analogous, for example, to I raised two girls, and I was very intentional that they would have black dolls, right? That didn't mean that I said they couldn't have white dolls. It just meant most of their dolls, 99%, were black, you understand? And so I think when we are, choosing books for our classrooms and for our reading groups, if you're in a book club, we choose our books with intentionality. Having said that, I don't believe in any kind of banning.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's like, I think Huckleberry Finn can be responsibly taught, like you said it yourself, without the context. It is a very difficult book in a classroom. But if you have a teacher or a professor that is not providing the right context and teaching it with skill and with consideration, yes, you put that book in. I had a professor, colleague of mine, call me a couple years ago, and she had been teaching, I think it was either Huck Finn, or it might have been Huck Finn, y'all. No, it was Uncle Tom's Cabin. And two of her black students had walked out of the class, and the class had kind of imploded, and she was distraught. And y'all know, if you work in these jobs and you're the only black person, they call you to help them fix it. And I was like, okay, thinking, what do you want me to do? It's not my class. But I did talk to her, because I did want to kind of like just say to her, well, what kind of lesson did you create around this? Maybe you might want to. And then she had further inflamed the students by refusing to like talk. It had really blown up in her face. So that is an example of not the book that did it, it was the professor that did that, And so it's us. It's not the art, And so I think in that particular instance, she was just not qualified. And I think there are a lot of teachers that are not qualified to teach those books, which are dated. Some books are dated, which represent a different time, which need to be contextualized, but no, I don't think should be banned. And then the second part of your question was about choosing the books yeah. Yes. Them. Mm-hmm. Yes, and again, with intentionality, I did try to choose for my children books that had black kids. I will say that, all of us in academia have heard the term universal before, universal themes, universal stories, and that has often been coded to mean white. And if you look at, I had considered homeschooling at one time just because I thought, I want to educate my children the way I want to educate them. I didn't do it because I don't have, not everybody is built for homeschooling, y'all, and I realized that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I could supplement, but all day long it's not going to work. But I did look at homeschooling curricula, and they were very white Christian. And, most all of them, you can find, they say, you can find secular homeschooling curriculums, but it's still very, very white. And they call it classical. In that excerpt that the beautiful lady just mentioned with Melania Trump and the robot, I saw the excerpt, and it was all about classical education. And that triggered me a little bit, that word classical, because that, like the word universal, often is coded as white. We're talking about linguistic imperialism. So I just think we have to be intentional. We have to be thoughtful in the same way that we choose black dolls, in the same way that we expose our children to community, in the same way that we take them to movies that are you get a black art exhibit that comes to the museum, kids, we going, those kinds of things. And that's intentionality. And there are white teachers out there who are trying to do that. I've had a few who were really trying. And when I encounter an ally that's trying, I do whatever I can to help them and to encourage them.
Co-conspirator.
Yeah. I love that as well. I'm going to look at you, Donna, and you tell me. Can we do one more?
Oh, yeah, hello.
Well, thank you all, and thank you to this amazing audience, this panel, and to Donna.
This was wonderful, of course. Thank you all so very, very much for being here, for supporting these writers. I really want to say thank you, Clarence, for shouting out Krishan, who could not be here. And she highly recommended Clarence, who is also a friend of the center. So we were really glad that you came and you said that. So I appreciate that as well. So I'm so glad we had this time together. But this is our last program for the conference. However, this evening, right here at 6:30, we are having our awards ceremony where we will be honoring Imani Perry, Camille Dungy, and Kashahun Chacol. So please come and join us for that. And there's Miss Dr. Perry's right there. And following this program, again, please support our authors. Their books, all of the books are downstairs. And our vendors, support our vendors. You have some time between now. You have an hour to shop and buy books and get them signed. And our authors are going to be downstairs signing books for you. And please, on your way out, if you have not gotten a survey, an evaluation of the program, please pick one up. If you don't feel like writing, scan the QR codes that are at the desk on your way out. Your evaluation of what we do helps us to continue our programs to make them stronger, better, faster, whatever we need to do to bring you back this time next year. And in terms of this time next year, we're going to be looking at a very sort of Black women across the literary spectrum with a celebration of Gloria Naylor. So that's the plan for next year. And so with your help and your support, we'll get the funding for it. So please make sure that you support the Center for Black Literature. And thank you all so very, very much for being here. We love you. We know you love us. And so go buy some books.